GoForThe2.com in with the Week 4 college predictions. Week number 3 did not disappoint. Amazing games across the top 25, culminated with the barn burner in Boulder between Colorado and Colorado State. Colorado State held an 11-point fourth quarter lead with just about 8 minutes left. Shedeur Sanders engineers the comeback, 98-yard drive with just about a minute and a half left to knock off Colorado State in overtime. They did have the 35-28 overtime lead. Colorado State gets the game-tying potential touchdown, and Jay Norvell kicks the extra point as opposed to getting the kill shot against Deion Sanders. He calls out Deion Sanders all week and then does not opt to have his offense on the field on the 2-yard line to put it away, hoping that somehow, some way, his defense potentially could get a stop when they couldn't get one in the final 8 minutes of the ball game. Is probably the most bizarre coaching decision we've seen out of a college head coach in the first 3 weeks of the regular season. But we'll see how this plays out. Top 25 ball games across the gamut, across the landscape. I have about 3 covered here. You can get the rest of them on Carver and Lisi every Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern, Sirius Channel 159. Also, college football today, 9 a.m. every Saturday, 9 a.m. to noon Eastern, Sirius Channel 159 or SportsGrid.com for the video component. Best bets, prop bets, under the radar games, top 25 games. We have you covered on college football today on SportsGrid.com every Saturday morning, 9 a.m. to noon Eastern, so check it out. Let's jump right into the 7-game slate. Like I said, if you want everything, you could always tweet me at GoForThe2, that's the number 2, or hit me up on Twitter. Let's jump right into it. Big ball game taking place in Morgantown. You have West Virginia and Texas Tech. West Virginia does get the victory over Pittsburgh. They grind out a very low-scoring game, 14-6 over the Pittsburgh Panthers. Garrett Green did get injured in that ball game. They forced turnovers against Phil Jurkovec, played very well in run support, made Pittsburgh completely one-dimensional. On the flip side, you have Texas Tech that did grind out a dominating home win over FCS opponent Tarleton State. When you look at Texas Tech right now from the series perspective, they've won 4 straight in the series by an average margin of victory of 17.6 points per game. Picked up this victory last year, 48-14 in Lubbock. But more importantly, we keep talking about it. What is the difference, especially in the first couple of games of the regular season where Texas Tech lost? The rushing attack wasn't as dominant. Well, they didn't get it going week 1 against Wyoming. They started to get it going against Oregon, a $177 on the ground. Follow it up with a 221-yard performance this past Saturday. Brennan Morton and Tyler Shuck both played. Shuck completed 50% of his passes, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Brennan Morton did complete over 60% of his passes as well. 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. The dual threat quarterback has more experience than potentially West Virginia. If Garrett Green can't go this weekend and he's potentially a game time decision, they're going to go with a freshman. Don't like Neil Brown in a big spot like Joey McGuire. The series perspective, and I think it's too much speed on the perimeter for Texas Tech. They are the more complete offense and defense. I think they roll. They're laying 5.5, 6. I think they roll to a double-digit victory this coming weekend in Morgantown. Big battle taking place in terms of Clemson. We know about Florida State. They got pushed to the limit against Boston College as basically a 26, 27-point underdog in that ballgame. We saw Florida State struggle early. Then they got the 31-16 lead and had to hold on 31-29 because Castellanos was on the move. Defense gets a stop. They get a late face mask penalty, and Florida State prevails. Florida State's defense right now giving up 268 passing yards per game. They allowed a $152 rushing to a completely one-dimensional offense in terms of Boston College. Was it a potential look ahead? Maybe, but they still gave up 152 yards to Boston College. Didn't like that effort. It's back-to-back road games, and on top of that, they have lost 5 straight to Clemson in terms of the series. Looking at it, Clemson has won 5 straight by an average margin of victory, 22.6 points per game. And on top of that, Clemson since 2015, a dominant 52 and 2 entering this year. They've won 2 ball games at home, so now they are 54 and 2 straight up at home in Death Valley. Only 2 losses during the time from 2015 till now. Nate Peterman in 2015 and Spencer Rattler in South Carolina, last regular season game, 31-30, when Clemson did have a 14-0 first half lead on the Gamecocks. So you look at this matchup, Florida State right now, Jordan Travis, he's playing well, completing well over 65% of his passes, 8 touchdowns, 1 interception. He's a mobile quarterback. We know about the front 7 led by Jared Verse, but it is back-to-back road games. Clemson right now pounding the rock for 5 yards per carry. The defense at Clemson, to me, is where this game is won or lost. I'm expecting a lower scoring game. Clemson only allowing 98 rushing yards per game, 3 yards per carry to opposing offenses, and more importantly, still have a very rock-solid third down defense, holding opposing offenses to 29% of their third down opportunities. Cade Klubnik has stepped up recently, over 600 passing yards, 66% completion percentage. Dabo over Mike Norvell. It's a road game for the Seminoles. Jordan Travis in that tough environment, even though it's a 12 o'clock kick, I'm expecting Clemson to grind out a 24-20 victory over the Seminoles Saturday afternoon. Think it's a little bit better in terms of the series perspective, along with how dominant Clemson's been at home. And we've seen Alabama lose at home, but expecting a bounce back spot by the Clemson defense in this ball game to force some turnovers. Another big battle in terms of the Big 12. We have Baylor at home against Texas. Numbers perspective suggests that Texas should steamroll the Baylor Bears right now. Sawyer Robertson and that offense have been completely one-dimensional in terms of more running the football. They're rushing for 166 yards on the ground. Sawyer Robertson is completing around 49% of his passes. But you look at Texas last week, they struggled with a very blue-collar team in terms of Wyoming. Wyoming did rush for 155 yards on the ground. I know it was one big run for the most part in terms of the first half of that ball game to give them a 7-0 lead, but they still held Texas to 31 points in that matchup. That was a one-dimensional offense in Wyoming entering that ball game. They were averaging $175 on the ground, 170 through the air with Andrew Peasley, and they were in position to potentially cut that ball game to a 17-point deficit. Now you have to go on the road to face Baylor. Baylor's secondary only giving up 166 passing yards per game. They're holding opposing offenses right now to 56% completion percentage, only 3 touchdowns allowed, 2 interceptions, and they've won the last 2 meetings in Waco over the Texas Longhorns. It's a 7:30 kick under the lights. I think Baylor tries to get into a rock fight with Texas. Lower scoring game, methodically work down the field, limit drives by Quinn Ewers. I don't think they win, but I think this game is similar to the Utah game. They were able to get Utah into the same type of game plan. Look for them to force some turnovers over Quinn Ewers. Dave Aranda, not on the hot seat yet, but needs this victory or needs a potential good showing to get back on track, especially when you lose to Texas State, you lose to Utah. This is another opportunity to potentially get right against one of the top teams in the country. Also, Dominic Richardson in that rushing attack did pound the rock last week, even though it was LIU, 270 yards on the ground. I think Baylor could be live, plus the 15 points in this ballgame. Another big battle is Oregon State, Wash State right now. Oregon State played lights out from a defensive perspective. Watch that game from start to finish against San Diego State. They jumped out 12-0, did win that ball game by 21 over the Aztecs. They got the win, but no cover in that matchup. They made Maiden completely one-dimensional, forced a couple of turnovers by the Aztecs, and that's why they were able to win that ball game. DJU did step up for the most part, completed over 60% of his passes. They did get a punt return for a touchdown as well. Now have to go into a tough environment against Washington State and Cam Ward. This is an offense right now in Washington State averaging 396 passing yards per game. Cam Ward, 72% completion percentage, 9 touchdowns, 1 interception. this Wazoo defense holding opposing offenses to right in the area of about 96 rushing yards per game. Very solid in run support. I think they have the ability to force some turnovers over DJU as well. Again, let's look at who Oregon State played. San Diego State, they played UC Davis and San Jose State. On the flip side, you have Washington State that did play Colorado State. We see a bounce-back team in Colorado State, how they played against Colorado, and more importantly, knocked off Wisconsin and Tanner Mordecai. I think they're the more battle-tested team, even though Oregon State won this ball game last year, 24-10 in Corvallis. I think Washington State is the right side. They strike the mild upset over the Beavers this coming Saturday in Pullman. I think that's a 7:30 kick as well. Let's talk about the big battle in terms of Utah and UCLA. UCLA playing lights out right now. UCLA undefeated. Dante Moore playing well. Dante Moore has completed over 60% of his passes. Rushing the football, he's only got 2 carries, -8 yards. So keep an eye out for that. Not mobile. He's a pure pocket passer. But this is still a rushing attack for UCLA that's averaging 188 yards on the ground with their former Bowling Green running back Carson Steele. But he goes on the road to face off against the Utes. It's going to be very difficult, in my opinion, for UCLA to win this ball game with a freshman quarterback. Cam Rising does come back for the Utah Utes in this ball game. Not only that, but Utah's pass defense only giving up 166 passing yards per game, gave up only 1 touchdown, forced 4 interceptions, and did face off against Florida and Baylor, 2 better teams than the body of work right now for UCLA. San Diego State, Ohio, FCS opponent. I like Utah laying the 4.5 to dominate this ball game. Might be tough for a half, but in the second half, I think Utah pulls away for a double-digit win over the Bruins. They have a 17-game home winning streak dating back to 2020, like the Utes and Cam Rising in this matchup. Potential bounce-back spot, Mississippi State, South Carolina. Miss State catching 6 points in this ball game. They did not play well against Jaden Daniels. They allowed Jaden Daniels to complete his first 14 passes. Will Rogers in that offense right now only averaging 165 passing yards per game. When you think about the evolution with the air raid offense, not the same this year. They're more balanced. They're pounding the rock for 175 yards on the ground as well. But we saw a South Carolina team that went toe-to-toe with Georgia. They had a first-half lead, could not hold on. Georgia makes second-half adjustments, and at the end of the day, did win that ball game by 10 points. More importantly, Spencer Rattler did throw 2 interceptions in the fourth quarter of that matchup. You look at South Carolina, they gave up 189 rushing yards to Georgia, mostly in the second half. Could they be worn down from that perspective? The emotional letdown being in that ball game from start to finish, coupled with the fact that right now South Carolina cannot run the football consistently. 1.8 yards per carry in terms of the rushing offense. That's not going to get it done. Even though they're going up against Mississippi State and Jaden Daniels abused them, this is a bounce-back spot going on the road to Columbia. I expect Zach Arnett to have a good game plan. Look for the Bulldogs to play more zone. Look for them to run the football on a very suspect front seven of South Carolina. And I think the Bulldogs are live as a 6-point underdog in that matchup. Another big ball game is Ole Miss and Alabama right now. You look at Ole Miss, they have lost 7 straight in the series by an average margin of victory of 27.4 points per game. Lost this game last year, 30-24. And we know about the quarterback change for Alabama. Jalen Milroe does get the start. That's the right call if you are Nick Saban. They struggled last week as a 33.5-point favorite against South Florida. They gave up 170 yards on the ground to a mobile quarterback in terms of Byron Brown, and that's where I think you give the edge to Jackson Dart. The numbers suggest that you bet Alabama here as a 7.5-point favorite, but I can't do it. I have to go with the more complete offense in terms of Ole Miss. They're averaging 300 passing yards per game, 326 to be exact. Dart broke out with a 251-yard performance, 1 touchdown through the air. He also rushed for a $136 on the ground and 2 touchdowns, average 9.1 yards per carry. And it's not Quinshon Judkins that's getting it done for this offense. It is their quarterback in terms of Jackson Dart. I like the defense as well for Ole Miss, playing very good in terms of third down defense, holding opposing offenses to 37% of their third down opportunities. They're getting a push in terms of the front seven, 8 sacks on the year. Very battle-tested in back-to-back games. Pushed to the limit against Georgia Tech, pushed to the limit against Tulane. Now they're catching 7.5 on the road. We talk about Alabama from the spread perspective. Only the 6th time they're laying about a touchdown or less right in that area, 8 or less since 2015. 2015 they split. They laid 8.5 to Ole Miss and lost. Laid 7.5 to LSU and won 30-14. They also in 2019 laid 5.5, 6 to LSU and Joe Burrow. They lost 46-41. They laid 5.5 in 2020 to Mac Jones. They lost that, not Mac Jones. Georgia won that ball game 41-21 with Mac Jones and Jalen Waddle, and then laid 7.5 to Texas and lost by 10 points. Are they going to lose again? It's possible. I just think that Ole Miss is the better, more complete offense. They can play from behind. If Ole Miss does jump up early, do you have confidence in Jalen Milroe and that offense to lead you from behind? All the pressure on Tommy Rees, all the pressure on Nick Saban. Give me Ole Miss to potentially strike the upset Saturday afternoon in Tuscaloosa. It's a 3:30 kick. Those are the picks for this coming weekend. We'll go rip right through them right now. We got Texas Tech minus the 5.5, Clemson plus the 2.5. We have Baylor plus the 15.5. We have Washington State plus the 2.5, I believe. We have Mississippi State catching 6, and we have Ole Miss catching the 7.5. The picks, and Utah minus the 4.5. 7 picks. So we got Texas Tech, we have Clemson, we have Baylor, we have Miss State, we have Wash State, Utah, and Ole Miss as the 7 picks. I'll see you on Saturday.